I know it's the second session, and some of you may have missed the first session, so I'll start with a little bit of background on the program and what's expected over the next 10 weeks. So this year's program is focused on Professor Jeffrey Sachs's book, My Age of Sustainable Development, with a focus on challenges and issues related to COP28, which is going to happen in November and December of this year. So the way we structure the summer program is we have 2 sessions every week. The first session on Tuesdays usually will focus on a theme related to sustainability and climate issues. And the second session on Thursdays will focus on a data or technical subject. So what we're trying to do throughout the summer is to provide knowledge on various thematic topics that could benefit your projects, but also introduce you to tools and resources that could support you throughout the summer as well. Oops. Okay, so this is just an overview of some of the different teams and organizations that are involved in organizing the summer program. This is an annual program that we've organized between the SDSN's SDGs Today program and the Center for Sustainable Development and other teams and partners like Mission 4.7. This is our 3rd annual program, and we're really excited to have everyone join us from all around the world. So just a few quick notes before we get started. So as you're aware, the session is being recorded. So if you don't feel comfortable being recorded, please don't turn on your video. If you're not speaking, please make sure to keep yourself on mute, and feel free to use the chat function or the Q&A function to share any comments or questions that you might have throughout the session. And for those who have just joined us, feel free to introduce yourselves and let us know where you're joining from in the chat. So before we move on to a little bit about what I do, I realized I didn't introduce myself. So I am Miriam Rabi, and I am with the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. I'm the head of the SDGs Today program, which is one of the co-organizers of the Eco Ambassadors Summer Program, alongside my colleagues from the Center for Sustainable Development at the Columbia Climate School. I just want to also give my colleagues from CSD the opportunity to introduce themselves for those of you who may not have joined us for the first session on Tuesday. So Radhika, hey, and do you want to go ahead and introduce yourselves before I jump into today's topic?
I am so glad to be here, and this is our first data session, and we always learn from you and from our colleagues joining from ESRI. So happy to be here. I'm Radhika Anger at the Center for Sustainable Development, working on a lot on sustainability issues. And so this is a great group because this group inspires me to think about how do we make our education more sustainable oriented. Happy to be here and glad to be getting all the ideas from you to shape our thinking going forward. I'll ask Hane and then Tim and Skylar to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Mariam. Thank you, Radhika. Hi, everyone. My name is Heian Shin. I work at the Center for Sustainable Development with Radhika. I'm one of the organizers and one of the co-creators of this program, doing content development with my colleagues here on the call. Every year we put this program together, but we end up learning so much from you. So I'm really excited this year also to learn from you. Thanks for being here. And I'm really looking forward to getting to know you for the next course of 10 weeks. Over to you, Tim and Skylar, to introduce yourselves as well. Thank you.
Okay, I'll go first. I'm managed to mentor. I go to Columbia at CEPA, and I am helping out with the Eco Ambassador project and kind of doing capacity building and helping with content moderation as well. Also assisting with anything else that Radhika and Heian need. So that's about it.
Hi, I'm Skylar. I'm an undergraduate at Barnard, which is one of the colleges at Columbia University. I'm working as an intern with CSG this summer, helping to put on the summer program, and it's really a joy to be able to learn with you all and go on this 10-week journey with you.
Wonderful. Thanks everyone for the introductions. And I'm excited to work with all of you over the next 10 weeks. So I'm going to try to set the scene for all of our data and technical sessions for the program with this one slide, and then hand it over to my wonderful colleagues from the ESRI StoryMap team for their presentation. So just a little bit of background on some of the core priorities that we focus on in SDGs today. And as you can see, it all kind of revolves around data and informed decision making. So we have 3 core priorities. The first is data curation, production, and visualization. We try to focus on identifying data sources and innovative methodologies that are being used to measure and monitor sustainability related topics. So we work with a wide range of data providers to access the data and then visualize it and package it in a way that's accessible to a wider audience, whether it's students, researchers, policymakers, anyone concerned with sustainable development and climate challenges. Our second priority is focused on what we call storytelling through a spatial lens. We wanted to kind of contextualize the data even further by adding a narrative and demonstrating the impact that this data has either on a community or a neighborhood or a decision-making process. So we use the ArcGIS StoryMap tool to create multimedia kind of narratives and content related to the data or the research project related to a particular SDG, so that we can create content that would allow readers to engage and interact with the data and also understand the impact that it has, not only through dashboards and maps and other data visualizations, but other multimedia content that can support that work as well. Keep note of that because that's going to be an important topic for today and the rest of the program. And then our third core priority is focused on education and capacity building. So this summer program is one of the educational activities that we engage in with our colleagues at the Center for Sustainable Development. And we have a lot of other GIS or geospatial related content available on our platform. I'll share a link in the chat for those of you who are interested in exploring the data or looking at some of the other video tutorials that we have, or even some of the story maps that students from our previous programs have created and published are all available on our platform. So I'll share a link in the chat in a little bit. The story map component that I mentioned is something that's going to be important to this program because all of you will be using the ArcGIS story map application to present your final project. So this is going to be an important tool to learn how to work with and how to create your story maps and publish them and understand all the wonderful features that you can use and integrate into your summer projects. So today's session, let's move on to the next slide, is going to be all about ArcGIS story maps. So we have our wonderful colleagues and partners from the ESRI StoryMap team here with us today, who are going to introduce you to the application and walk you through a demo so you have a better sense of how you'll be integrating that into your work this summer. And then later on, perhaps over email, we'll kind of walk you through the process in terms of how you can access the application in the next couple of weeks. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to my wonderful colleagues, Michelle, Ross, and Will from the ESRI StoryMaps team. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Miriam. I'm Ross Donahue. I'll kick things off from the ESRI side, and then I'll hand it over to my colleagues to provide a little bit more demonstration of the functionalities and some resources that you can use to get started. I want to thank Miriam and the team at SDSN and the Eco Ambassador Program for inviting us back. This is always one of the most inspiring workshops we get to give each year, and we're so thrilled that you're using this platform as a tool to help communicate the really important work that you're all doing. So I'm going to share my screen and get started with a very brief introduction to what is ArcGIS StoryMaps and this platform that you'll be using for your final projects. So it's worth noting I'm presenting in ArcGIS StoryMaps here, and at its very core, StoryMaps allow you to combine interactive maps with rich multimedia content and narrative text to tell stories about the world. It's a very flexible platform that doesn't require any coding, but it really makes it easy to create a simple website that you can share out and communicate your work effectively using maps, multimedia, and text. Now, one of the really helpful things is it's responsive, so it works on a variety of screen sizes, so you don't have to worry about optimizing for your particular audience. And like I mentioned, there's no code needed. You don't need to use HTML or CSS or JavaScript, but it uses a very basic kind of content block format. So as you assemble the content of your story, you'll use these blocks that range from a basic block to media blocks and immersive blocks. And my colleague Will demonstrate how to get started using those blocks in a minute. So in terms of those immersive blocks, you can see here we've got some scrolling text on top of media. These can create more memorable and impactful storytelling experiences. And again, depending on the content of your story and how you want to communicate your message, you can incorporate these immersive blocks into your final presentations. Now, they're hosted on ESRI's cloud server, so you don't have to worry about which browser you're using or whether they'll be maintained, or new update to Chrome will break things linked in your story. We take care of that for you. You all own the content that's created. We're merely just hosting it. And we're seeing some really exciting growth in the numbers of stories being used. I think this Eco Ambassador program is an example of a sort of new and innovative pattern that you all sort of have pioneered in a way, where programs are actually using ArcGIS StoryMaps as integrated into a program itself as a final deliverable at the end of it. And so I think it's really exciting to see the stories that are created from these projects, but also how the folks that go through these programs integrate these tools later on throughout their careers and throughout their professional development. There's a lot of different organizations using ArcGIS StoryMaps. Again, it ranges from nonprofits to government agencies and global organizations. And it's really easy to get started. Now, the one thing I'll mention before I hand it over to Will is if you have any questions throughout this series of presentations, please use the chat to ask us. We want to make this as useful for you all as possible and make sure that we're answering your questions over the next hour. So with that, I'll hand it over to Will to share how to get started.
Thanks so much, Ross. Let me do the screen share baton pass. Okay, should be good. So yeah, now that you sort of have an idea of what ArcGIS StoryMaps is, I kind of wanted to start by showing some fully built out examples of what you can actually do with it, and given the audience, what better place to start than in the Sustainable Development Goals realm. And it just so happens that a few years ago, our competition was all about Sustainable Development Goals, and we even had a student track so that folks sort of with your level of experience and sort of in your sort of academic environment were able to submit their stories and get recognized for the work that they were doing. And I thought it'd be great to sort of start by showing what some of the winners of that student track of that competition accomplished. And so this was the grand prize winner. It's called Hidden Realities, and it was an investigation into femicides in Turkey. And what this story did was just pull off a really effective, almost kind of, I hesitate to use the word simple, but there weren't a lot of sort of like flashing lights and bells and whistles. It was just a really effective mix of media and text to sort of, make the impact that they wanted to make. Starting with that sort of that silhouette animation in the cover. They pulled in some really nice infographics here. And it's actually kind of interesting. Since this competition happened, there's now a way to actually sort of recreate these infographics in the story maps builder using the timeline block. So we're always getting ideas from what our users are doing. So yeah, just really, really effective, powerful story, and that was recognized for being sort of the best in class. Another great story, the second prize winner was iBanker Kendall Regency, which was about sort of the ways geospatial technology is used to analyze the challenges in a rice producing region of Indonesia, the island of Java. And what I'll do here is I'll jump right down to the method section, which I can do because the authors enabled this navigation bar, which kind of acts as a in-story table of contents that follows you. Because what this I think was one of the most powerful parts of this story. They used one of those immersive blocks Ross talked about called Sidecar, and they employed a technique called map choreography. And what that is this sequence of sort of scrolling slides with maps sort of occupying the main part of the window here. And as the reader scrolls, something about the map changes a little bit. So it's relating a different sort of type of information, or just pointing something out. And it's a really great way to present all the information you need without sort of having to present it all at once, without having to overwhelm a reader with too much to learn at one time. So just a really great, they're showing all the different sorts of data that they were analyzing here. And another really good thing this story did was they used what's called the embed block to bring in an outside web app that they also created with ArcGIS software. But the ArcGIS story maps builder can't do everything, and just by its nature. But what we have done is we've incorporated this ability to pull in content from elsewhere on the web, so that if the builder can't do it, you can always bring it in from somewhere else, and it looks just like it belongs here. So it's another really great feature of ArcGIS story maps that this winning story used. And finally, the bronze prize winner was this beautiful story, What You Can't See in the Tennessee River. And this story got really high marks, really stood out for its what we would call its visual language. So it's just the way that every single element of the story kind of fits a stylistic approach. And so that as you scroll through it, everything looks just, really gorgeous. They've used this sort of white and light blue color palette in their infographics that they've brought in, these little sort of flourishes here that they've used. So just really effective job of that. And what they've done is they've backed that up by using what's called a theme in ArcGIS story maps, which is sort of where you can control all the color schemes and the fonts and every sort of all these other aesthetic elements of the story. And I'll get to that a little bit during the demo. So yeah, I just wanted to give you a taste of sort of what people are actually doing with this tool to tell their stories, especially about SDGs. And as you've seen, we've gotten some remarkable work, and we're excited to see what you all create as well. So now that you've seen that, let's actually go under the hood a little bit and sort of actually take a look at how you might start putting some of these stories together. And so when you log into storymaps.arcgis.com, you're taken to this landing page, which is your content library, and it's where everything that you've created is housed. So that's stories, collections, and themes. I'll get to these latter two in a little bit. But now let's just start by jumping right into the builder using this new story button. That brings us to a completely blank canvas. And so I'll start by giving it a title. bring in a subtitle, and then you can add an image or a video to the cover. Like you saw in the Hidden Realities one, did a really, really powerful video. Here we'll just use a still image. And I kind of don't love the way this is kind of cropped out. I can adjust it a little bit, but still kind of feels like it's not landing for me. So I'll just, there's a few cover styles, and I kind of like the way the text and image, work off each other here. So that's what I'll do. And then so getting down into the actual body of the story, like Ross mentioned, you pretty much everything you add is through this block palette. This little plus button is your best friend as you're working on these stories. And here's that screenshot Ross showed. Here's all the things you can add to the story. And so I'll walk through a few of these, but first let's just, let's start with the simplest thing. Let's add some text. And you'll see that the text editor here, you can do a lot of different kind of formatting things: bold, italicize, strike through, subscript and superscript. You can make it a hyperlink. You can change its color. You can align it if you want. And there's also a bunch of different text types. So, this is just regular normal paragraph text, but, if we have 3 different heading styles and some, you can also create lists and sort of standout quote block. But here we'll just make this a heading because it's sort of introducing the story. And now we'll bring in sort of some more, just a paragraph. And of course, another big thing you want to do with ArcGIS Story Maps is bring in media. So here we'll just start with, here's all your media blocks, and we'll start with just a simple image. So yeah, add that and bring it in. And it'll, it starts with this, sort of occupying a lot of the screen. You can make it even bigger if you want to really have it stand out. But what one thing that, I kind of don't want this to dominate this section, so I'll have it just kind of float alongside the text, and and then I can add a caption to it to, just provide some context. And so, yeah, very simple kind of point and click way of adding things to the story. So now let's go back into the block palette. And as you can see, there's other media options here, very straightforward. Most of these audio and video, sort of speak for themselves. Image gallery is like sort of a collage of a lot of different, multiple images. There's the embed block I mentioned. You'd click on that and you'd paste in a link and it'll bring it into the story. Swipe block's a fun way to compare, have either 2 images or 2 maps side by side, and there's a slider that compares them. And then timeline block. But what I really wanted to spend some time here on is the immersive blocks Ross talked about, because those really are sort of the bread and butter of ArcGIS Story Maps, and they're what really helps it stand out as a storytelling tool. And so I'll start by adding a sidecar, which was the one that Ross used in his story. And so you got a few different layout options, but I'll start with the docked one here. And so what happens is a sidecar is based on slides. And so you start with one blank slide. And then I'll add some, blank slide with a big media section here, and then sort of a place to add some additional context. So I'll add some text there. Then I'll use my media section. This time I will add a video of a flooded football field. And what's really nice about this sidecar is that you can add more than just text to these narrative sections. You have a lot of the same kind of abilities that you have in the regular block palette. So what might be good here is having just a little tiny map that sort of lets people know where that football field is. And one of the features in ArcGIS Story Maps that lets you do that is what's called an express map, which is kind of this blank slate, very simple cartography. You don't need any GIS skill. You don't need any sort of, advanced education in this. It's just a map where you can add points and polygons and lines and annotations, and just really create a simple, slick map in just a few clicks. So let's pinpoint sort of where that, it's somewhere in that rough area. And then zoom out a little bit so that people get, a sense, broader geographic sense of where that is. And so now, just as they're scrolling through here, all at once, you get this video, powerful video. get the text explaining what's happening, and then just beneath it, the map, just telling you exactly, where that's happening. And then, so you want to add more slides, very easy to do that. This is your slide panel here. It's where you sort of organize all your sidecars content. And this time I want to add, a map that's a little more involved, something that somebody has actually created with GIS stuff. And so I'll again go to add a map. This is a map that I know I've added to my favorites at some point. You can also see, maps that people in your organization have created. Data from the Living Atlas. This is a huge resource that I definitely highly recommend, digging into a little bit if you get the chance. But here's the map I'm looking for. And so what's going to happen here is you bring it in, you see all the layers that have been sort of already included in the map by whoever created it. And I want it to sort of look at the effects of sea level change in 2040. And so I'll add, sort of the supporting, what that is. I'll make it a subheading just to kind of give it some oomph. And now I actually want to show you what, so that sequence you saw, the map choreography, it's actually really easy to do that because you can duplicate slides. So you don't have to start from scratch. You don't have to try to match exactly, where the two maps are, what their extent is. So I'll just duplicate this slide and I'll go back into the editor for it and say, instead of 20, I'll just turn that 2040 layer off, turn the 2080 layer on, and just change this. And just like that, you get this, scrolling experience where it's changing as the reader reads through it. They don't have to do anything at all. And they're getting a really, really strong message without being sort of overwhelmed by information or having to do a lot of the lifting themselves. So just a really, really neat technique that if you're using geospatial data, definitely worth considering as you're putting your stories together. And one more thing about Sidecar that's great is, so now I feel like I've got all this sort of wasted space here. I actually want to use a different layout. The floating one sort of gives a little less room for the narrative portion, and I can just go back and forth without losing anything I've already added. So just like that, very simple way of doing that. So those are some basics of the story builder. There's another block called Map Tour that I'm, if we have time later, I'd like to come back and show, but I do want to show a couple other sort of bigger picture things, starting with sort of how the story looks and feels. And a lot of that is done through the design panel. So, here's, you can turn that navigation bar on that you saw in the other story. A really handy thing to include so people can easily follow where they are within the story. And then here's where that theme that I was talking about was. And now when you first start, there are 6 sort of out of the box themes that we've prepared for you. And they sort of follow different, sort of different broad, sort of aesthetics. There's like a foresty one. This does have sort of a watery one, but I don't quite love it for this particular story. And then we've also got another gallery sort of some additional professionally designed themes for different moods or topics. Again, not really a good sort of watery one there. So what I'll do is I'll go into the themes that I've already created. And you see, here's the one I prepared sort of just for this story. And you just apply that, and that's, this is exactly what the Tennessee River story did. They had a theme and they just applied it to their story, and it changed sort of all these elements. And just to kind of see what what that actually looks like to create one of those themes, I'll go back to my projects, and you'll notice, by the way, it's constantly auto saving, so you never have to worry about like, oh no, I left the builder and didn't save and I've lost all my work. This is constantly saving everything that you're doing, every single like keystroke that you enter, everything you add. So I can just leave this entirely and not have to worry about it. And this time I'll go to my themes part of my sort of content library, and I'll start a new theme just so you can see sort of what the theme builder looks like. And here you, like I said, you have almost complete control over sort of every visual element of the story. And you can change your background color, and the whole time you've got warnings about whether sort of the text in the background are accessible enough, if their contrast ratio is appropriate. So that's really, really handy. And it's nice to just have this color picker to drag around so you don't have to do trial and error, trying to figure out what the right, what the right hex code is or anything like that. It's very, very intuitive. You've got some of these, accent colors that you can play with. Huge library of fonts. We have a connection to the Google Fonts library, which is like 1,000 different fonts. So it's a little bit of a rabbit hole sometimes, actually, but definitely nice to have that flexibility. And then, sort of all these other elements here. You can change the way the quote block looks. You can specify a a different default base map. You can add a custom separator, sort of something to bridge between sections. So yeah, just a lot of different neat things you can do. Add a logo. So yeah, just Theme Builder is just a wonderful tool. Definitely recommend, because I said that visual language is a huge part of what makes a story effective and stand out. So definitely don't sleep on that. And finally, one more thing I do want to sort of walk through here is this thing called a collection. And what that is, it's a way to sort of bundle a lot of different stuff. Generally we use it most often for stories, but you can actually bring a lot of different things into a collection. So I'll start again here just by creating a new collection. And then again, give it a title. And you can also add, some extended, description, summary of what the collection is. But for now, I'll just go straight into adding stuff to it. And as you can see, you get sort of ArcGIS content's the main kind of thing that you want to do, but you can also just directly upload images, videos. You can embed outside content again, PDF files. So a lot of flexibility, a lot of versatility here in what you can add. But right now we'll just stick to stories. And again, I've added these stories to my favorites, so it's easy to find them. So it was the Kendall Regency story. It was one of them. Oops. You can add multiple things at once. There's a hidden realities. And then the Tennessee River, if I can spell it right. So there, I've added these items to the collection. Now here they are, and once they're in there, it's super easy to rearrange the order they're in. And so this is called the collection overview page. And what happens is when you click on one of these, you go into the the actual item itself, but you've got this header that kind of follows you, and it you can cycle through the items really easily. And just a few more things you can do with a collection to really make it spruce it up. We've got a few layout options. The one I like for this, because these are just 3 stories, I want to give them equal weight. Get this journal layout, which allows just gives each one its own line in the collection overview. And then also some navigation options. This one I like a lot for sort of shorter collections. You can see the full title of each item as you're sort of going through the collection. Then you can always get back to the overview page. And then of course you can add a theme to a collection if you so desire. And that just affects the overview page. It doesn't change the theme of this actual item in the collection. So now you feel like you've got a product that you're ready to send out into the world. One thing I highly recommend, you definitely want to preview, which we have a preview mode here. And this is great because as Ross mentioned, these are designed to work on all different kinds of screen sizes, all different sort of forms of mobile technology, as well as desktop computers. And you can actually get a sense of what it looks like on each of these different kinds of technologies, these screen sizes. So here's what it would look like on a tablet, roughly. You can get a sense of what it would look like on a smartphone. This is great because if you see something's not quite lining up, you can go back into the builder and tweak it so that it definitely will work. It'll look right on all these screen sizes. So if you think it looks good, you're ready to publish. And so you just click publish, and you got a few final sort of options that you might want to mess with here. This is how the item, the story or collection will look when it's shared on social media. If you don't like this you know, a collection will generate sort of a thumbnail collage, but you can replace that with, you know, just one of these images or any other image that you want, and you can change the title of it or the, you know, the summary if you had given one already in the collection. And then when you go to publish, this determines who's able to see it. So it starts with, you know, sort of only being yourself. And this is good for things that aren't ready to go out in the world yet. You can also have an organization option, which is great for collaborative work. Like, say somebody you're working with, you want them to be able to, you know, give some feedback to your story. You can, you know, if they're sharing an ArcGIS online organization with you, you can set it to this mode and they'll be able to see it, but people, you know, the general public won't. But then you can also just go to public, and that's when it's ready to be widely shared. So I'll keep this one just for me for now and publish it, and you'll get this, you know, publishing screen, and then that's it. That's really sort of the basics for how you can do different things in ArcGIS story maps, and you know, sort of how the builder works, and some of the, you know, some of the aesthetic elements and other things that you just will always want to keep in mind when you're working on a story. And I know, you know, this can kind of seem like a lot. We've tried to make it as intuitive as we can, but we do have lots of resources that will help you get going on your storytelling journey. And now I'll hand things over to my colleague Michelle Thomas to tell you about sort of how we can help you get started.
Okay. So I dropped a link actually in the chat that is to the ArcGIS Story Maps website. When you first go to the website, it will take you to an overview page. But one thing to note is that the thing we hear most often from storytellers is that the builder's fun. There are a lot of resources to help people get started. There's a lot of playing you can do, but the two things that storytellers always tell us most helpful is, you know, I need resources to know how to plan my story. And then I want to see examples of what other people have done to get inspired and kind of figure out what I want to do. So you have this overview page, but if you want basic information about storytelling itself and about the builder, if you go to the resources page, it starts with a story that's 9 steps to great storytelling that is actually made in a story. And it will give you some tips of like, okay, maybe think about having a little hero or do a world within a world. So that's a really great place to start. Everyone's favorite is this planning and outlining your story. It actually is a blog post that goes through how you get started, how to outline the whole thing, getting your media sources ready. So I would highly recommend, as you start to think about your story topic and how you're going to craft the entire thing, starting with that planning and outlining. We've had a lot of people tell us it's almost like writing, you know, my 5-paragraph essay. That's how I start and write it and actually put it down on paper like that. So the storytelling resources are at the top, but as you scroll down, you'll see you can go to the blog post, but there are a lot of different build your skills cards to take you to different kinds of topics. This one is exceptionally helpful getting started with ArcGIS story maps. It actually walks through every single step you need to take to build a story, and then a few extra things too. I also really love this collection of ArcGIS story maps tutorials. Again, it walks you step by step through a lot of different features within ArcGIS story maps, and then there are other cards and things you can click on to get you started. The other favorite, probably the most favorite thing on this website, besides the planning, is our ArcGIS story maps gallery. We actually curate 100 to 125 stories at all times. Just to give people inspiration and examples, you can just scroll down the page and go page to page, or you can actually filter this information very easily. And you see that you have some categories here. We have some recently added that are kind of fun. If you're looking for something that's a little bit different, You can see that my internet is a little bit challenging, but there are some in here that deal with digital humanities, some that focus on conservation, a lot of different options. But what I would recommend starting with is there's a content type. And under here, there's stories and there are collections. And under collections, just like Will showed you, you have groups of stories and stories grouped into topics. So every single year we have a story maps competition where we have winners and we actually interview those winners. Will shared the 2020 with you. Within these collections, you will find ESRI's 2021 Storytellers of the Year. And the 2021 actually was by an entire competition focused on just high school and college students and young professionals, and that's it. And this is a really great one to look at. These are the finalists. And then we have the actual track 1 for high school and track 2 for college, the winners there. But the other thing that we have in here is an actual collection of interviews that we did with every single storyteller to find out, how did you make your story? What approach did you take? What was your strategy? What was the hardest thing that you had to do? So it's a really great way, especially, you know, some of these high schoolers that are really trying to figure out, I have so much information, how do I narrow it all down? And they took very different approaches to their storytelling. That's a really great one to look at. And we also have the same kind of thing for 2022, which was last year. It was a great combination. It was more on theme than by student or professional or young professional, but it had a lot of different themes in here, from humanitarian to science to urban planning and some special categories. But again, this one here also has an entire collection of interviews with these storytellers that talk about how they did it and why they did it, and what was easiest for them and what they liked most in the builder. So just really recommend that each of you take a little bit of time, play around in the gallery to see what's there, see what kind of stories that you like, and take a look at these collections and get advice from other storytellers, because that's really, honestly, you know, the best way to learn is to play with it, get inspired, and hear from other people, and then start planning your story. So that is what I have. All right, and I'll hand it back over to Miriam.
Thank you all so much for that incredible presentation and overview on story maps. I know that was probably a lot of information for those students who might not be familiar with story maps. I saw that there were a lot of great questions in the chat, and this is a good opportunity for students to raise their hands, unmute themselves if they want to ask any questions from the team. We have a little bit of time for a Q&A, and just to let everyone know that we will have virtual office hours throughout the program and at the end of the program. So my colleagues are also familiar with story maps and can answer any questions in case you can't think of one or at the moment, or come up with other questions throughout the course. So would anyone like to ask any questions? Feel free to use the raise hand function or unmute yourselves.
We can maybe go to one of the questions that came up earlier. There was about embedding audio. Maybe if we can show a way of doing that. And I also see a hand for Lara. Thank you.
Lara, do you want to go ahead and ask your question, and then maybe we can have the team answer both questions?
Yeah, thanks. So I was seeing that you can access with a public account, but you can also access with a more subscription account that I think has like special features. Do we need to access with the subscription account, or is a public one fine?
That's a great question. I'll answer that question and then hand it over to my colleagues at ESRI about the question related to how to embed audio. So Laura, all the students that are part of the program will have access to an ArcGIS account so that you can have access to all the different features that you would need to create your story map. So we'll be sending out instructions via email on how you can access that, and we'll set that up for you.
Yeah, I would just add that you are able to use the public account, anyone, anywhere can use the public account, but like Miriam mentioned, there's some features that we demonstrated today that are only available in the subscription account, and the fact that you all have access to that as part of your program is definitely a resource to take advantage of. And then the question about audio, I love this question. And, the short answer is yes, you can include it into a story, no problem. And there's a couple different ways to include it. One is just to add it directly as part of those media blocks that Will was demonstrating. There's an audio block, and it's just simple upload an MP3 format. Now, the other way to do it is actually in an immersive section within a sidecar slide. I'm not sure, Will, do you have any audio? I was just trying to download some to demonstrate
So
that.
yeah, I don't have like MP3s on hand, but I do have the Sounds of the Wild West story, which is one of our favorite uses of audio ever. And ArcGIS story maps. And so what they did, like Ross mentioned, so they've got their sidecar here, and I don't know if this will come through my monitor or not, but what's happening here is when you unmute these, you get to actually hear the sounds. So this is birds chirping. Then you scroll down here and it's geysers bubbling. And so what they've done is, and here's some wolves howling. So they've added audio directly to these sidecar slides so that when a reader opts into the unmute, they just hear it as they're scrolling. And it's another layer of just immersion into the world that the story is creating. And then they've interspersed that with, so here's some more sounds I'm trying to find. Yes, here. So they also have interspersed that with sort of the more sort of mainstream way of adding audio, which is just to, go in the block palette and add an audio block. And then, readers can choose to click and listen to it or not. And so they've got sounds for each of these animals that readers can choose to listen to. So yeah, I don't think that went through my headset, but yeah, that's just to show sort of how it would be applied to a story.
Yeah, great. A couple just notes about using audio as a storytelling mechanism. It can be a really effective way to bring in the voice of characters in your story. It can also be a nice way to add some audio or sensory texture to your story. So it can be sort of a background component of your story, or it can be front and center and really elevate sort of the communities or the individuals you're trying to share your story about. In that example that Will just showed, the whole story is about the audio soundscape of this really biodiverse ecosystem. And so it takes more of a front and center role in the story. But we've seen authors use it really effectively as, an item that people can click on and listen to the actual characters talk about their experience or the natural phenomenon.
Yeah, to add to that, we've seen people make children's books or young adult books and actually use the audio and read along with the different slides. And we've seen that actually happen in multiple languages. So people will make those children's books in multiple languages and record the audio in multiple languages as well, which is really a great approach. People are very creative.
If I recall correctly, I think we did have some eco ambassadors use that function in their story maps. So I think there was one group I remember, they recited a poem and they included that audio in their story map, which was great. Are there any other questions? And I did include a link to the Eco Ambassador page on our platform where we have the story map collections from previous years. So you can see how we used a collection and how some of the previous Eco Ambassadors created their story maps. So all of that information is available on our website. I see there's a question, are we making stories based off of an SDG? So yes, the idea is that you will be selecting a topic within the SDG framework related to a climate challenge that you might be aware of or facing in your community, and work on a project related to that topic or SDG. Can you share all the related info and docs on Google Classroom? I believe everything that we discuss during the sessions will be available in Google Classroom for you to access in between sessions. Great. Thank you for sharing the link, Skylar. Any other story map related questions? Okay, I'm trying to keep track of all the questions in the chat. Let's see. Okay, would you rather have our topics be very general or more localized? I think, oh, I see that Hayan has already responded to that. Great. Oh, this is an interesting question about, so are we able to add different languages to one story so that the user can switch in between different languages? So this is a question for the story map team.
So currently you can't, like, there's not like a toggle button within a story that changes it from one language to another, but it's actually easier than it might otherwise be to do the sort of manual creation of two different stories, because you can duplicate an entire story and then just swap out the text as needed, so you don't have to completely build both stories from scratch. So all the visual stuff that wouldn't need to, wouldn't be affected by translation, you can just create a carbon copy of that story, and that stuff all remains, and you can just swap out the text. So that's sort of our workaround for right now for how it would be yeah, sort of best to approach that.
Yeah, I also dropped a blog post. We haven't seen a lot of stories doing this, but there have been a few with multiple languages in there, and I put a blog post in there so that you can actually see what it looks like when you put different languages back to back.
Thanks for sharing that. We've had a couple of collaborators who wanted to have their story maps in multiple languages. So that's kind of what they did. They just duplicated it. And then we have different versions in different languages available on the platform. Great. Are there any questions that I have missed? I'm going to ask my colleagues to jump in if there's anything that I've missed in the chat. Great. Well, if there aren't any other questions, as I mentioned, feel free to reach out to us with any questions. We're happy to pass them on to our colleagues on the call, or to have someone from the team support you with any questions or challenges you might be facing once you have access to ArcGIS Story Map. I think I'm supposed to make a couple of announcements. Let me share my screen again. Okay. So this, and I think Skylar has been sharing the link and other information in the chat. So as I mentioned, all the different content and materials that we discuss during the sessions are available in Google Classroom. Hey, and if there's anything else that I need to mention, please feel free to jump in.
Sure. Thanks, Mariam. I think Skylar had her also posted in the Zoom chat, but please do access the Google Classroom because you will find a lot of details because we have only our sessions. We know we're leaving out some details and materials that go along with what we're talking about. And you'll also see from, we discussed this on Tuesday, but we have a little fun activity that's called an SDG bracket so that you can decide which SDG you want to focus on. And I just wanted to add, along with the SDGs, using that as a framework, you might also be inspired by the different things that the speakers talk about as we go through the different sustainable development issues and topics that they're going to cover. There's also another activity of the week that is called What's Most Valuable, that links a little bit more to the awareness of self and others and global citizenship. That is the theme for this and next week. So please do check those out as well. And about I know there were a lot of questions today on the project and getting the license for creating the project. So those we can also go over next week. But again, all those details will be in the Google Classroom. And please do email the program team if you have difficulty accessing the Google Classroom links and if you can't search it by the code. Thanks, Mariam.
Great, thank you for that information. And I also just wanted to remind everyone that our next session is going to be on Tuesday, June 27th at 11 a.m. EST. So we look forward to seeing you all then. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to the team.
I know we're at the end of our session, Mariam, but we did get an email from Professor Jeff Sachs's team. He's attending. He is.
I'm here.
Hi, Jeff. Thanks so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Sorry to be late, and I'm going to have to be very brief. I'm in Paris at this summit for a new global financing pact for the Sustainable Development Goals. So it's quite interesting to be here, actually. Can you introduce me, introduce the eco ambassadors, and then I'll say hello?
Sure. We know you're very busy, so thanks again for taking the time to join us today. So basically, this is the second session of the 10-week summer program. So Thursdays are what we call technical or data days. It's when they are introduced to a new platform or software or data resource that they can incorporate in their summer projects. So each student is going to select a topic related to the SDG framework and develop a solution in a research project over the next 10 weeks, and we'll present them to us at the end of the summer. So this year, the theme is focused on your book, My Age of Sustainable Development, with emphasis on topics related to COP28.
Fantastic.
Today, we had our wonderful colleagues from ESRI introduce the students to story maps because the students will be submitting their final projects in a story map format. So that's what we learned today.
Great. And where are the students from?
All over the world. So we had everyone introduce themselves in the chat. I think if I remember, we had folks from the UAE, Turkey, Japan, India, the US, let's see, Argentina.
Cool.
All over the world.
Oh my God, I see everybody. Ajan from Turkey, Ajlan, and from Argentina. That is phenomenal. Well, hello to everybody. I'm Jeff Sachs. I'm a professor at Columbia University, and also very lucky to be president of the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network, which is what we're doing, which is trying to find solutions to help every part of the world to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Agreement. And now we have a couple of other important agreements as well. The biodiversity framework, the so-called Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework, which is a framework to implement the Convention on Biological Diversity, Save Nature. And we also have the new High Seas Treaty, which is a part of the UN Convention on the Law of the Seas. And it was agreed in March to protect a significant part of the oceans as natural reserves to protect the threatened oceans of the world. So today, I don't know if you can see behind me, but there's it's a little hard with the light, but all the flags, there's a summit meeting in Paris that was called by the president of France, President Macron, and the Prime Minister of Barbados, Prime Minister Mia Mottley, who's amazing, to bring together world leaders. And it's a lot of heads of state, prime ministers and presidents, and a lot of finance ministers and environment ministers and environment envoys to recognize a basic issue that when you make solutions, they generally require resources. In other words, you have to pay people, you have to buy infrastructure, you have to construct protection against rising sea levels, or to implement solar fields for zero carbon electricity. And then the question comes, who pays for this? How is it financed? Certain things are paid for out of budgets, out of the current revenues collected in taxes. But for most developing countries, and for a lot of rich countries too, the SDG financing needs for the solutions that you're going to be coming up with are beyond the budgetary means. They should be financed by borrowing or by new investments in companies or in state enterprises. And yet the global financial system does not channel sufficient resources to especially the poor countries, that is the so-called low-income countries and the lower middle-income countries, which combined are half the world population. So the problem is we set nice goals, but they're not achievable unless they're backed by real money. So this meeting that I'm at today and tomorrow is at least aiming for a set of specific agreements on how to raise the flow of financing, especially to the low income and the lower income, or the low income countries, lower middle income countries, and to especially vulnerable groups of countries. And I just got out of a session, which is why I'm late, of small island developing states, which face particular problems by being small island developing states. One of the problems that they face both in the Caribbean and in the Pacific is a very high vulnerability to typhoons in the Pacific, as they're called, or to hurricanes in the Caribbean. And there are even tropical storms underway just in these hours right now. So they have special financing needs, and yet our global financial system does not take into account these special financing needs. So today and tomorrow is this brainstorming about how to make the World Bank or the African Development Bank or the Asian Development Bank or other institutions more fit for purpose, so that they really provide the scale and kind of financing needed to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Agreement, and the biodiversity framework. And I hope a good, strong declaration is made tomorrow. This meeting won't actually sign documents for X billion dollars, but it could provide the political catalyst so that when the G20 countries meet in India in early September, those 20 countries, which are almost 90% of the world GDP, will agree to scale up the financing, especially through institutions like the World Bank, the IMF, and the regional development banks. Then in November, there is the summit that will review the halfway mark of the Sustainable Development Goals, because 2023 is halfway between 2016 and 2030. So there you are. And as our Sustainable Development Report just issued yesterday shows, we're way off track and we need more financing. So that will be the next important meeting. Then two more that I want to mention. There will be COP28 hosted in Dubai, which will be focused especially on the climate convention. And then next year will be the Summit of the Future, which will be all of the UN member states, all 193, getting together to talk about what do we want, expect, and what do we plan to work for in the 21st century. So very important. So to all the eco ambassadors, thank you so much for your work. You're going to be giving us the narratives of what to do, and you're going to be telling them as in the storylines that ESRI has enabled us to use so well. And so I thank ESRI for the solutions always, which are so wonderful. You're learning a lot of tools this summer, so you can come up with some very powerful frameworks for action. And our job at the Sustainable Development Solutions Network is to both help you gain the knowledge of the tools and the expertise and the focus, but then to champion your solutions. So I can't wait to read the solutions, to see what you come up with, and then to work together with you going forward to how to put these solutions into practice. So let me thank you for the chance to be with you. I'm running to another session just now, but thank you, eco ambassadors, for your leadership. And we're really, really excited by what you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jeff, and good luck with your meetings.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody. And Maria,
Wait,
thank
can
you
I
so
please
much.
say something,
Bye.
please? Mr. Jeffrey Sachs, you're my hero. I've read your book and I've heard your courses and everything, and I just want to say it's such a privilege to be here with you, and you are the one that put me in this track of sustainability, and you gave me my passion and my purpose. So I just want to say thanks for everything. That's it.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for what you're doing. It will be very enriching and you'll make a big contribution. And I'm so grateful for your interest and such nice words also. So we're with you. We're here to help empower you with the tools, with the knowledge, with the specific ways that you can help to lead. But I have no doubt you're going to be a leader. And thank you so much for that wonderful commitment.
Thank you so
And
much, Jeff. And
bye-bye to everybody.
have a good rest of your day. Great. So I know we're over by 10 minutes, but I think it was great to hear from Professor Sachs, an update from Paris, and his inspiring remarks to set the scene for the next 10 weeks and the exciting projects that you will all embark upon. I think we'll probably close the session. I'm sure everyone has to jump off. And thank you so much again for joining us today, and for, as Professor Sachs mentioned, your commitment to this work over the course of the next 10 weeks. And a very special thank you to our colleagues from the ESRI StoryMaps team for joining us. And we can't wait to share your projects and the work that you do with the ESRI team. And as Professor Sachs mentioned, across all these different important events coming up in the next year. So thanks again, and see you all on Tuesday. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.